Hello and welcome back. Today we will be going into how to make the riveted chainmail instead of just the supplies. So first things first, of course, we'll just quickly go over the supplies in case if you didn't have to watch the first video. First things first, hammer, doesn't matter what kind, so long as it's able to be used to squish the rings. Punches, one to help flatten the ring, like just a certain part unless you want the whole ring flattened, and then a steel punch to mark the hole where you'll be drilling. We'll be using copper wire for the rivets because it's soft and pliable, and so it is easier to use on the rivet tool. And then we'll be using 16 gauge aluminum welding wire. I got this from the Ring Lord and it works pretty good. This is the block of wood that you would use just to drill holes in and punch the hole, all that good stuff. Next are the Snips, rivet maker, and then the jigs that you use to make the ring. And yeah, so I'm just using small spools because this is an example video. This will be for the drill jig. This will be for the handmade jig made by Chainmail Iron Skin. And yeah, let's get into it. And so before you get into coiling the wire, I highly recommend wearing a glove just because safety first, especially with the hand that'll be holding the wire. As you can see, as the wire is unleashed, it'll slice, and so you really don't want it cutting up your fingers. You'll have a bad time. This is less for the experienced chainmail makers and more for just the newbies. For this jig, you just fit the wire in through the hole, and then it goes through the metal loop, and then it gets in through that little hole, unless it doesn't want to. And you go through until it's sticking out the other end, and then it's just as simple as that. Then you just snip it off with like a pair of bolt cutters or wire cutters, because this is aluminum wire after all, so you don't really have to worry too much about it being difficult, although it is obviously kind of tightly knit. So you might have to fight just to get enough space open so you can snip it off. Now we'll do the main jig. And this is where the glove comes in. Like with that jig, you don't really have to worry about your finger getting cut. But with this one, unless it's like set up in a special way, like if you're just doing it as simply as I am, you definitely need a glove. And so now we get into the snips. So basically what you want to do is put the wire through the hole. Let me see if I can get a shot of that. Yeah, so you put the end through the hole and have a little meat sticking out, and then you just cut. And you should get a ring that looks like this. This part will be used to make the rivet area. And so you just repeat that several times, or until you have all the rings made. So we will now be skipping to the next part where we anneal the rings. Alright, so we have our rings ready to be annealed. For this part, since it's aluminum and it has a low melting point, it's just as simple as taking a torch to it and blasting it until it starts to oxidize and it changes color from shiny to more matte finish. And once it's all completely matted, then it's basically ready to be like whacked with a hammer. So just as a quick example, You just take it like that. And you can use like even just a pocket torch really. Aluminum isn't that hard to anneal. So it's like that, and then you move on to the next. And you can use a larger torch. I prefer to use the smaller one simply because the fuel is a little cheaper for me, but yeah, you can use a large torch, just quickly blast them with heat until like they've changed appearance. And yeah, that's all there is to it. Nothing that hard. Next we'll be getting into the hammering. Alright, so for those of you that are now wondering about how to flatten the rivet area for the ring, you can either just use a simple hammer, or you can use a flattened punch and just go like that. And then you have your area. I'm just going to quickly flatten that a little bit more. There we go. And there you have it. There we go. And yes, I'm aware that my anvil has marks on it, and that it's a railroad tie. I just have to make do with what I have. It's much easier than using a rock. Alright, so we have finished flattening all the rings, so here are the results of our progress. So now what we want to do is just get a little hole slammed in using a metal punch, and then we will be drilling the rest of the hole. Alright, so in order to mark the hole, you just go as simple as this. And it'll leave a tiny little divot that will then allow the drill to get stuck in and not drift around. And you just repeat this. Now you can also just punch the hole right through, but that actually risks tearing the ring. And by doing this, you don't actually have to anneal the rings a second time, because since it's aluminum welding wire, it's already soft. But if you do plan to punch the holes through instead of drill, then I would highly recommend annealing them again with the torch. Alright, so for this next part, you want to use a very small drill bit. I don't remember the exact dimensions of the one that I use, but it's pretty small. Unfortunately, I lost the case which had the size marked, so my memory isn't as good, but yeah. So then you just put it in the drill. And then place it on, and you get to work. And you don't have to go fast. Actually, I would highly recommend against going fast. Just nice and slow. And there you go. You have a little hole for the rivet. Alright, so now comes the part where we make the rivets for the rings. We will be using 18 gauge copper wire for the rivets. As you can see, these are pre-cut, and all you simply do is you take the rivet, fit it through the hole like that, and then you take it in the rivet clamps and you just simply clamp down. Then you have your rivet. And the reason why we are using copper wire is because copper wire is very soft and therefore it's easier to make rivets from. You can use the aluminum wire or other material for the rivets, but this is aluminum welding wire for the rings. It might be more likely to break the ring because, again, this is an actual riveted chainmail. This is more decoration riveted chainmail. So it's still riveted chainmail, but it's not actual riveted chainmail, if that makes any sense. And then the rest of the process is pretty simple. You just loop the rings together and put rivets on, or you put the rivets on first and then loop 4 rings into one ring, make the unit, and then close this one. And then eventually you'll have something like this. Now, I understand that some of you might be a little annoyed that this isn't a video that teaches you how to make historically accurate riveted chainmail, but in my experience, it's best to start off small, if that makes sense, and then build up from there. Get the skills necessary to make riveted chainmail before you actually make historical chainmail, because if you just go right into it, you're going to waste so many precious rings that could have otherwise been excellent riveted rings because you'll have mess ups. The best part about aluminum welding wire being used for riveting chainmail is not because it's strong at all, but because it is cheap, recyclable, and it's easier to practice on. I will be making another video about how to make actual riveted chainmail once I get my foundry up and running again. And when that day comes, I'll be able to show how I make riveted chainmail again. And also, this video isn't really about how you should make it. This is just like some tips that I've found are useful. So take what you want, do whatever you wish, and yeah, happy forging.